Chapter 1. The Warming Hut. The blizzard came from nowhere, transforming their peaceful cross-country skiing afternoon into a fight for survival. David pulled his 8-year-old daughter closer as the wind howled around them, her small body shivering despite her heavy winter gear. "There!" Susan shouted over the storm, pointing through the swirling snow. "I see a building." The warming hut materialized from the white void like a gift from heaven, a small log structure with smoke curling from its chimney and warm amber light glowing in the windows. David had skied these trails for years but had never noticed this particular shelter. Still, with little Emma's lips turning blue and 10-year-old Michael struggling to keep up, he wasn't about to question their luck. They stumbled through the unlocked door into blessed warmth. The interior was simple but welcoming, wooden benches along the walls, a stone fireplace crackling with dry logs, and shelves stocked with emergency supplies. Most importantly, the temperature inside felt like a tropical paradise compared to the Arctic conditions outside. "Thank God," Susan breathed, pulling off her snow-crusted gloves. "It's so warm in here." David frowned slightly as he helped the children out of their ski boots. The fire was burning well, but the hut felt warmer than any wood fire should have made it. The air itself seemed to pulse with heat, wrapping around them like a living thing. "Dad, I'm already getting hot," Emma said, unzipping her jacket. "Can we take off our coats?" "Better to warm up gradually," David advised, though he too felt sweat beginning to form under his thermal layers. The warmth was almost overwhelming, luxurious, and enveloping in a way that made him want to curl up and sleep. They settled on the benches, sharing trail mix and hot chocolate from their thermoses. Outside, the storm raged with increasing fury, but inside the hut, they felt completely safe and protected. The warmth seemed to seep into their bones, melting away the fear and exhaustion of their ordeal. "We should try to contact the ranger station," Susan suggested half-heartedly, but even as she spoke, she was settling back against the wall with a contented sigh. "Let them know we're okay." David reached for his satellite phone, then paused. His fingers felt strangely heavy, and the simple act of opening the device seemed like an enormous effort. "In a minute," he murmured. "Just need to rest first." As evening approached, the warmth in the hut grew even more intense. It no longer felt like external heat. Instead, it seemed to be drawing something from deep within their bodies. David noticed that despite the temperature, his breath had begun forming visible clouds, as if the air around them was somehow both scorching and freezing. "Mom, I feel funny," Michael said, his voice sluggish, like something's pulling at me from inside. Susan tried to respond, but her words came out slurred. She looked down at her hands and gasped her fingers were turning pale, despite the overwhelming warmth surrounding them. Ice crystals were beginning to form on her eyelashes. David struggled to stand, but his legs wouldn't obey. The heat that had felt so welcoming was now revealed as something predatory, something that was slowly draining the life from their bodies. The fire in the fireplace hadn't consumed any wood. The logs were exactly as they'd found them. The warmth wasn't coming from burning fuel. It was coming from them. Outside, something massive shifted in the darkness beyond the windows. Through the amber glow, David caught a glimpse of pale flesh stretched over impossible bones, of eyes that reflected the firelight like a wolf's. The Wendigo had been patient, allowing them to feel safe and warm while it slowly fed on their life force. "David," Susan whispered, her lips now blue despite the heat. "The children." But Emma and Michael had already stopped shivering. They sat peacefully on their bench, smiling contentedly as frost formed on their hair and their breathing grew shallow. The Wendigo's hunger was methodical, and efficient. It would drain every drop of warmth from their bodies while they remained conscious enough to feel grateful for the shelter. By dawn, the storm had passed. When the rescue team found them 3 days later, the family was arranged peacefully on the benches, frozen solid in positions of perfect comfort. The fire was still burning exactly as they'd found it, and the hut was still impossibly warm. The ranger who discovered them noted in his report that despite the sub-zero temperatures inside their bodies, all 4 victims wore expressions of absolute contentment, as if they'd died feeling perfectly, blissfully warm. Chapter 2: The Rescue Cabin. Jake and Lisa had been lost for 6 hours when they spotted smoke rising through the pines. Their GPS had failed around mile 8 of what should have been a simple day hike, and the temperature had dropped 20 degrees since noon. "Thank God," Lisa breathed, pointing toward the gray column above the tree line. "Someone's home." The cabin sat in a small clearing like something from a Christmas card. Warm yellow light spilled from frost-covered windows, and wood smoke carried the comforting scent of burning pine. Even from a distance, they could feel heat radiating from the structure. An elderly woman opened the door before they could knock, her weathered face creasing into a welcoming smile. "Oh my stars, you two must be freezing. Come in quickly." "We're so sorry to bother you," Jake began, but the woman waved him off. "Nonsense. I'm Martha, and that's my husband Frank by the fire. We get lost hikers through here often. Lucky you found us before dark." The interior was exactly what they'd hoped, for rustic furniture, handmade quilts, and a stone fireplace throwing heat throughout the room. An elderly man in flannel sat in a rocking chair, smoking a pipe. Sit, Martha fussed, guiding them to chairs near the fire. "Frank, put the kettle on." Lisa sank into the chair with relief. The warmth felt incredible after hours in bitter cold. Within minutes, Martha had produced bowls of steaming soup and thick bread. "This is amazing," Lisa said. "We can't thank you enough." "Just being neighborly," Frank said, his voice oddly hollow, as if it came from very far away. "We know how dangerous these woods can be." As they ate, Jake studied their hosts. Martha moved with surprising energy for her age, but her movements seemed off too fluid, too graceful. Frank hadn't moved from his chair once, just sat rocking gently. "You folks live here year-round?" Jake asked. "Oh yes," Martha chirped. "Been here longer than we can remember. These mountains get in your blood." Frank chuckled, a sound like wind through dead leaves. "Part of you," he repeated. As evening progressed, Jake noticed oddities. Despite the roaring fire, he was beginning to feel cold, again genuinely cold, as if something was drawing heat from his body faster than the fire could replace it. Lisa seemed unaware, chatting happily with Martha, but Jake saw her lips beginning to look pale, and when she laughed, her breath formed small clouds. "Martha," Jake said carefully, "is your heating working? It seems to be getting colder." Martha's smile never wavered, but something shifted behind her eyes. "Oh, that's just the mountain air, dear. Very thin up here. Makes the heat harder to hold on to." Frank stopped rocking. In the firelight, Jake could see the old man's face was wrong. The skin looked loose, as if it didn't fit over the bones beneath. When Frank smiled, his teeth were far too sharp. "Yes," Frank said, his hollow voice carrying new undertones. "Very hard to hold on to." Jake stood abruptly, grabbing Lisa's arm. "We should go. Thank you, but we need to." "Sit down," Martha commanded, her voice no longer grandmotherly. It carried the weight of centuries and hunger of endless winter nights. "You're not going anywhere." Lisa gasped as she tried to stand and couldn't. The warmth that had felt welcoming was now revealed as a trap the Wendigo was drawing their life force through terrible mimicry of hospitality. "What are you?" Lisa whispered. Martha's face began to shift, features becoming sharper, more angular. Her skin took on grayish pallor, eyes sinking deeper into their sockets. "We're what happens to people who get lost in these woods. the faces of travelers who never made it home. Frank rose from his chair, his body unfolding in ways human joints shouldn't allow. He was far taller than he'd appeared, limbs stretching like tree branches. The pipe fell from his mouth, revealing a maw filled with needle teeth. "You made excellent guests," Martha said, her voice now a harmony of different tones, previous victims speaking in unison. "Your warmth will sustain us through another winter." Jake felt his strength ebbing as invisible tendrils pulled heat from his core. Beside him, Lisa shivered violently despite the fire. Ice crystals formed on their clothes, breath coming in white puffs. The elderly couple continued to change, human disguises melting away to reveal the ancient thing beneath. The Wendigo had learned to wear the faces of those it consumed, using their appearance to lure new victims. As consciousness faded, Jake saw the truth. The cabin wasn't a refuge, it was a feeding ground. The Wendigo had used this place for decades, wearing previous victims' faces to create the perfect trap. Martha and Frank had been real once. Now they were just masks the creature wore. By morning, there would be 2 new faces in the Wendigo's collection, airing violently despite the fire. Ice crystals were forming on their clothes, their breath coming in desperate white puffs. The elderly couple continued to change, their human disguises melting away to reveal the ancient thing beneath. The Wendigo had learned to wear the faces of those it consumed, using their appearance to lure new victims into its den. As consciousness faded, Jake saw the truth. The cabin wasn't a refuge, it was a feeding ground. The Wendigo had been using this place for decades, wearing the faces of previous victims to create the perfect trap. Martha and Frank had been real once, probably the first hikers to find this place. Now they were just masks the creature wore. By morning, there would be 2 new faces in the Wendigo's collection, and the next lost travelers would find a young couple in a warm cabin, eager to help them get home safe. Chapter 3: The Winter Festival. The annual Pine Ridge Winter Festival drew families from across the mountain valley, gathering around the massive bonfire that had burned at the town square for over a century. Hot cocoa steamed in mittened hands, children laughed building snowmen, and warm community filled the frigid air. Mayor Henderson stood near the fire, his familiar face beaming as he watched neighbors celebrate. Everyone knew Tom Henderson, his booming laugh, generous spirit, his way of making everyone feel welcome. "Beautiful night for it," said Carol Mason, approaching with her twin boys. "Perfect weather," Tom agreed, breath-forming clouds in the bitter cold. Nothing like a good fire to bring people together. The bonfire towered 15 feet high, fed by wood donations from every family. It threw delicious heat to the outer ring of celebrants, where teenagers roasted marshmallows and elderly couples shared thermoses. The flames danced hypnotically, creating a circle of warmth and light. As evening progressed, more families arrived. The Johnsons brought hot apple cider. The O'Briens set up their storytelling circle. Young couples danced to music, their laughter echoing off surrounding mountains. "Tom, you outdid yourself this year," called Dr. Patricia Wells, the town physician. "This fire is incredible." Tom smiled that familiar smile, but if anyone had looked closely, they might have noticed his teeth seemed slightly sharper than usual. "Just glad everyone's staying warm," he said. The warmth from the bonfire was indeed remarkable, almost supernatural in its reach. Even families at the square's edge felt perfectly comfortable despite sub-zero temperature. Children were shedding heavy coats, adults loosening scarves. The heat seemed to wrap around each person individually. Mrs. Chen, the town librarian, was first to notice something odd. "Is anyone else feeling strange?" She asked her husband quietly. "I'm so warm, but I can see my breath getting thicker." Her husband nodded, confused. "I feel like I'm overheating, but look." He held up his hand, his fingers were starting to look pale, almost blue. Around the fire, other people began experiencing the same phenomenon. The warmth felt overwhelming, luxurious, but their breath came out in increasingly thick vapor clouds. Frost was forming on eyebrows and scarves, even as people complained of feeling too hot. "Tom," Dr. Wells called out, concern creeping into her voice. "Something's not right here. People are showing signs of hypothermia, but they're all saying they feel warm." Tom turned toward her, and in the firelight, his face looked different somehow. His features were sharper, more angular, and his eyes reflected the flames like an animal's. "Nothing to worry about, Doc. Everyone's just enjoying the warmth." One by one, people began to sway on their feet. The overwhelming warmth was making them drowsy, but the cold was working its way into their bones despite what their senses told them. Children sat down in the snow, smiling contentedly as ice crystals formed in their hair. "I feel so cozy," murmured little Annie Johnson, though her lips were turning blue, "like I'm wrapped in the biggest, warmest blanket ever." Her mother tried to respond but found her words slurring. Around the fire, the entire community was succumbing to the same strange phenomenon, feeling blissfully warm while their bodies slowly froze from within. Tom Henderson walked among them, his form beginning to shift and change. His familiar face was melting away like a mask, revealing the ancient, hungry thing beneath. The Wendigo had been among them for months, wearing their beloved mayor's face, learning their routines, waiting for the perfect moment. The bonfire continued to burn, but its heat was an illusion. The Wendigo was drawing warmth from their bodies, feeding on their life force while they remained convinced they were perfectly comfortable. The festival meant to celebrate community had become a feeding ground. As their body temperature dropped, the townspeople's breath created thicker clouds of steam. The Wendigo moved among them like a shepherd tending his flock, inhaling the vapor like incense, savoring the warmth that stole from each life. By midnight, the entire population of Pine Ridge sat or lay around the bonfire in positions of perfect contentment. They had all died feeling wonderfully, impossibly warm, their final moments filled with comfort and joy. The bonfire burned on through the night, casting dancing shadows over the frozen tableau. When morning came, searchers would find them arranged in a perfect circle, faces peaceful and content, as if they had simply fallen asleep during the most wonderful festival of their lives. Chapter 4. The Trophy Cave. Deep beneath Mount Blackthorn, where no human foot had ever tread, the Wendigo descended through passages carved from living ice. The tunnels spiraled downward for miles, each turn revealing chambers that pulsed with stolen warmth, a vast network of caverns serving as both home and mausoleum. The creature moved through its domain with ancient satisfaction, its elongated form perfectly adapted to narrow passages. Behind it trailed wisps of vapor, the last remnants of warmth from Pine Ridge, slowly dissipating like the final breaths of the dead. The first chamber contained the oldest memories. Here, suspended in walls of pristine ice, hung artifacts from centuries past, arrowheads from native hunters, brass buttons from colonial soldiers, tin cups from gold prospectors. Each item was perfectly preserved, trapped in crystalline tombs that reflected the Wendigo's passage. The creature paused before a section of particular significance, carved bone necklaces and beaded pouches, remnants of the first people to recognize what it was. They had known the hunger that walked on two legs, had spoken its name in hushed tones around fires that could never burn bright enough. Deeper into the mountain, the caverns expanded into cathedral-sized chambers. The walls were lined with thousands of personal effects, each one a life consumed, a warmth stolen. Wedding rings caught filtered light from the surface. Children's toys sat frozen in eternal play. Eyeglasses, watches, lockets containing faded photographs, all arranged with careful precision, as if the Wendigo were curating a museum of human attachment. In the center of the main chamber stood the Wendigo's greatest prize, a massive tree made entirely of ice, its branches stretching toward the cavern ceiling. From each limb hung items of special significance, mementos from victims whose warmth had been particularly sweet. The creature approached a newer section, where fresh additions awaited placement. From the warming hut, David's wedding ring, still warm from his finger, Emma's small mittens, bright red against the ice, Susan's reading glasses, fogged with final breath. The Wendigo arranged them carefully, ensuring each piece could be seen and remembered. From the rescue cabin came Jake's hiking compass, its needle frozen, pointing toward a home he would never see again. Lisa's silver bracelet, a graduation gift from her parents, caught the ambient light as it settled into its icy display case. But the newest additions were most satisfying. From Pine Ridge came dozens of items, representing an entire community's worth of warmth. Mayor Henderson's gold watch, the real mayor's watch, taken after the Wendigo had consumed him months earlier, Dr. Wells's stethoscope, still bearing the faint echo of heartbeats it would never hear again, little Annie Johnson's stuffed rabbit, its fur now stiff with frost but button eyes still bright with childish love. The Wendigo moved methodically, placing each item with reverence. A father's wallet filled with photos of children who would never grow up. A mother's necklace bought with money saved from part-time work. A teenager's cell phone, its screen dark but containing thousands of messages that would never be answered. In the deepest chamber, the Wendigo maintained its most precious collection items from the very first feeding, centuries ago when it had been something else, something human. A crude mirror made of polished metal, reflecting nothing now but shadow, a few strands of hair, preserved in ice, belonging to someone whose name had been forgotten even by the Wendigo itself. The cavern walls pulsed with gentle warmth, sustained by life force drawn from countless victims. This stolen heat kept the Wendigo's collection perfectly preserved while providing the creature with a sanctuary where it could rest between hunts. As the Wendigo settled into the center of its trophy chamber, thousands of eyes seemed to watch from the frozen displays. The ice reflected light in strange ways, creating the illusion that the preserved objects were still alive, still warm, still connected to the lives they had once defined. The creature closed its eyes and felt the pulse of stolen warmth flowing through the mountain's veins. Somewhere far above, new communities gathered around fires. New families shared hot meals. New warmth waited to be claimed. When the urge to feed grew strong again, it would return to the surface. It would wear a new face, speak with a trusted voice, offer shelter to those lost in the cold. And eventually, their treasures would join the endless collection. In the trophy cave, surrounded by remnants of countless human stories, the Wendigo waited for winter to deepen, for new prey to venture into its territory, for fresh warmth to preserve forever.